been almost a year since your last visit, and I just want to check on how you're doing.
Hey, Dr. Zan. Everything's okay, I guess.
Just okay?
Well, I find myself like a little anxious and worrisome at times.
I see. Is your worry excessive in intensity, frequency, or amount of the stress it causes?
Yeah, I feel like it interferes with some of my daily tasks.
Do you find yourself worrying excessively over small things?
Like what?
Like being late for an appointment or turning in homework late?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you find it difficult to control the worry once it starts?
It's really hard for me to shake off the feeling.
Okay. Well, it looks like I'm going to prescribe you Alprazolam then.
Alprazolam? Wait, what's that? What is it used for?
Alprazolam was developed by Upjohn Laboratories in the late 1960s. It was originally created to be used as a superior sleep aid with muscle relaxant. As more research was done on the drug, representatives of Upjohn realized its effectiveness on anxiety, panic, and mood disorders. During that time, many other antidepressants were on the market that were much harsher and more toxic. This led the market for benzodiazepines to sink at the time, so Upjohn attempted to reposition its benzodiazepine as a drug specific for panic disorder. Upjohn presented a new drug application to the FDA called Xanax as an antidepressant, producing about 50 double-blind studies. This proved that Alprazolam was better and less toxic than other drugs available at the time. The Upjohn company filed Alprazolam in 1969 and was granted a United States patent for Xanax in 1976. The FDA approved Xanax on October 16, 1981, and assigned it as a Schedule IV drug of the Controlled Substance Act in November 1981. Upjohn Company eventually released Xanax to the drug market in 1981. The FDA gave approval to Upjohn, but then they changed their minds and decided that Upjohn could not launch Xanax as an antidepressant, but as an anti-anxiety medication that does not produce depression. Since Upjohn had already spent millions of dollars on studies of Xanax to establish that panic was really an independent disease, the FDA did not require them to compare it to placebos or other anti-anxiety medications that were available at the time. By the early 1990s, Xanax had become one of the hottest drugs in psychiatry, prescribed by many psychiatrists. Xanax is currently the most prescribed benzodiazepine in America. Xanax falls into the drugs of benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines act at the gamma-aminobutyric acid receptors, or GABA. In particular, benzodiazepines act at a subtype GABA receptor, specifically at the GABA-A receptors, which are sometimes called benzodiazepine receptors. When benzodiazepines bind or attach to the GABA receptors, they bind at a location separate from where GABA itself would bind. This type of action is called an allosteric effect. It results in increased action at the GABA receptor. The ion channels open and allow the passage of negatively charged chloride ions into the neuron. This influx of negatively charged ions pushes the membrane potential further from zero and makes it less likely the neuron will fire an action potential. This type of neural inhibition is the basis for the effects of benzodiazepines, for by inhibiting the activity of neurons that make up networks involved with anxiety and arousal, the drugs are able to produce calming effects.
Alright, so say I was speeding downhill with this car towards a sharp curve, and I want to slow down to make the turn.
So the brakes represent the amount of GABA molecules of the brain. If there isn't enough GABA naturally present in a person's brain, it won't be able to provide itself with the natural brakes to slow down the activity. Xanax acts by making what little GABA you do have work more strongly.
So in a sense, Xanax can be paralleled with applying stronger pressure on weak brakes so that the car can make the turn safely.
Alright, here's a prescription for Alprazolam. Remember to take only the specified amount on the bottle, and especially do not mix it with any alcohol.
Wait, why? What's so bad about that?
Xanax can be highly addictive and may cause withdrawal symptoms, especially if the drug is used for a long time or at high doses. Mixing of alcohol greatly increases the sedative effects, but also increases the chances of you falling into a coma or possibly even death.
Can I purchase this medication from other places?
Technically, you aren't allowed to unless you have a prescription. However, you can also buy it illegally from the streets, which I do not recommend you to do. According to figures from DEA, Alprazolam is one of the top 3 drugs being diverted to the black market. Over the past few years, higher number of legal prescriptions for Xanax has increased the availability of the drug on the streets. There are people called intermediates that have prescription for the drug, then they're the ones that sell publicly illegally to the public.
Does that affect the public severely?
Yes, there has been an increase in Xanax-related emergency room visits due to non-medical uses.
So why doesn't the government ban the drug?
Despite problems with abuse and withdrawal, it's still commonly prescribed because it's very effective in treating anxiety. And laboratory studies have indicated that its abuse potential is actually lower than its other alternatives, so it proves that it's somewhat a safer drug compared to others.
Oh, okay. Alright, thanks Dr. Zan.
No
I'll be
problem.
careful on how much I take.